Thank you for auditing the always positive, unedited new music review show hosted by a French professor who didn't expect to get a new Protomartyr album. You see, when I started this channel back in 2018, I wasn't really aware that there was like some kind of international post-punk movement. So I was sort of late to the game, and I was getting a lot of the second and third albums of these groups as my first albums. A great example is Protomartyr, which you see behind me, their last album. An album which I liked so much that I actually have it twice. I have it in its pristine, unopened version. I bought two by mistake, and I liked the band enough, I'm like, I'll just let them be supported. Now, I'll give this away sometime. Maybe I'll give this away on the channel. Who knows? But I mean, that's how much I like that album. And what was funny was when I said all these positive things about Ultimate Success Today, a lot of people sort of commented, oh, bro, you should have heard their last album. They're on the decline, all those kinds of comments, which happened across the board with basically every single one of these post-punk bands, you know, like Shame and Idols and Fontaine's DC. It was always like everyone would tell me that I missed their peak. But I sort of refuse to believe that because this album is nigh perfect. And when I think about this and I think about this new album and my reaction to it, I get angry at myself because I sort of react the way those people reacted in my comment section. I first listened to this album and my initial take was not nearly as positive as it is now and was not nearly as positive as it was towards that album. It reminded me of a conversation that I had with the undisputed king of this disco, Anthony Fantano, when I was talking to him about why does he do negative reviews, you know, because I sort of think it's cheap and easy. And he basically described that it happened, he had to start doing them. He didn't used to do negative reviews, but once he started reviewing artists he liked and their new projects, all of a sudden he needed to have some sort of way to differentiate themselves. So I sort of get it. I sort of get it. But in the end, with really good musical acts, with really good artists of any kind, you just have to have faith. You have to trust that your initial reaction might not be correct. You know, this week has been a great week for Detroit art. I Think You Should Leave Season 3 came out. I'm watching it over and over and over again, and my initial reaction was negative. And just like it was for Season 2. You have to trust these artists, and you have to really buy into it and figure it out, and then see, after a month, after 5 listens, after 10 listens, if it really is not as good as the last album. Now, I think the problem is that the first 2 tracks on the new Protomartyr album, okay, on Formal Growth in the Desert, are my least favorite tracks on the album. Make Way and For the Future. Now, that announces this sort of themes that they have, and the final song makes reference to the first song, but in general the feeling that I had with these first 2 songs is that there was a scope to this album, there was a richness, there was sort of a catchy aspect, there was a variation in their approach. Songs like Worm in Heaven versus Processed by the Boys, you have this great variation, and I felt listening to this album for the first time, and especially the first 2 songs, that they didn't have that kind of scope and variation throughout the album. Less catchy as well. Just there aren't as many earworms on this. Not as many earworms in heaven. But the more I listened, and especially the more that I listened with my family, you know, put it on the speakers behind me, kind of boomed it through the house, the more I realized that this is wrong. You know, it's actually a very good album. It's just, it's more subtle. It's more in shade than it is in sort of black and white. And I think that means that as time goes on, I'm going to buy 1 copy of this album. You know, thanks to my Patreons, I'm able to buy music fairly consistently. So I will buy 1 copy of this album. I get the sense that over time I will just come to appreciate it more and more and more. I think a similarity, you know, as we sort of think about this band, now that I can put them into better context, now I've been doing this channel for 5 years as opposed to 1.5 when I reviewed them the first time, is, you know, they follow certain tropes of the modern post-punk movement. Chief among them is a lead singer who is not very lead singery, who's lead singery in a punk way, you know, who's sort of brash and forward, and it doesn't have to be masculine. Often it's a very masculine lead singer. Like this guy has a very sort of brutal style. In this case, it's John Casey. But what I like is that this album is interesting in its thematics because he does this trick where he uses a lot of very fancy words, like science words or literary words or foreign words, and they have extreme importance. So he's kind of like yelling these words out at you with a kind of brutality. But then the words themselves force you to go to the dictionary, force you to look them up. And then when you look them up, you realize there's a real depth and a softness and a vulnerability that comes through these words, which, through their complexity, create a kind of barrier between you and the content. Again, that's why, really reading really helps. I am a drummer by formation. That's my main instrument that I used to play. I mean, I still play, but, rarely. And one thing I will say about this band is that this is a band where there's a lead singer, okay? And then there's the drummer. And then sort of way back here is the guitarist. And then behind the brick wall is the bass player. That's sort of how they are presenting. I assume they all make art together. This is not to disparage the bass player or the guitarist. It's more how they create their soundscapes. What makes them have this great kind of brutal feel is that the drummer, Alex Leonard, I believe is his name, just really is upfront. I mean, he's almost the most lyrical member. It feels as though a lot of his drum beats are what create the songs as opposed to the other way around. And so, the themes here are mostly, not too far from this. The world is going to hell. Like we're going to hell, and it's going poorly, and it's our fault. In some ways, I think it's in conversation, or can be seen as being in conversation with Cave World by Viagra Boys. Very similar, growly, charismatic lead singer who is singing about the de-evolution of humanity. This is not as cohesive as that. That feels like a theme album. This feels like a collection of tracks. But what I like is that there's some personal elements mixed in. And this is where, I have to break one of my rules. I try not to research a lot before I review an album. I try to just experience it as art. But with all these little words that I was trying to pick up, what is Picaresque? What is he even talking about? I ended up reading some interviews. And one thing I will say is that John Casey, as a lead singer and songwriter, I don't know if he's the lead songwriter, but he's the lyricist. He's very upfront with telling you what things are about, which is nice. He says what a lot of these things are about, so I'm going to weave that in, and it ends up being a very personal album. It ends up being a very personal album that I can relate to. We are basically the same age. I am 9 months younger than him, I think. Yeah. We're both born the year of Tom Brady and Kanye West. And, so a lot of it's kind of middle-age blues, but it's not like, oh, gee, my back hurts. It's more like, how do I grow? It's that theme of growth in the desert. How do I grow? How do I emotionally grow? How do I deal with the death of my parents? If you've been watching the channel, my dad just died. My mom died 6 years ago. It's been tough. It's been really hard for me to adjust to these changes and this pain that I feel. And it's just part of being this age. You just end up having to deal with these things. So all of that's all kind of wrapped in to the point where I relate to this album so much that I sort of... It's not a middle-age album. Do you understand me? It's not like for middle-aged people. It's a very human album that I think adequately and interestingly expresses certain feelings you have when you are in your middle ages. Okay, do you see that distinction? It's a fine distinction I'm drawing. But I mean, there is music out there for middle-aged people, but that's, Foo Fighters. This is not that. This still feels like it's young people music, even if it's describing this. One of my favorite words that he uses, it's a word I knew, but I'll provide a definition for you anyways, is picaresque. So he, at one point, refers to something as a Midwest picaresque. So let's take those terms, one by one. Picaresque, the dictionary definition, the adventures of a roguish but appealing hero, usually of low social class, who lives by his wits in a corrupt society. Hey, Protomartyr, I got you. This is you. This is your stuff. You are the Midwest picaresque. You wouldn't be so arrogant or pretentious as to say it. So you ascribe it to someone else in one of your songs. But we know what you're doing. And as the kids today would say, I am here for it. Lit fam, no cap. Have you smashed the like bucket? After I just said lit fam, no cap? Please smash the like bucket. Please subscribe. My channel's doing well. I'm having a lot of success lately, but I need to keep going. I need to keep growing so that more people can appreciate great art like this. I hope that I am doing something important with this channel, with the level of care and detail that I give to these artists. So please support me just by liking and subscribing. Yeah, you can Patreon too if you want, but that's fine. That's only if you want to tip the creator. Spoiler. So that's the Picaresque side. And then there's the Midwest side. And this is an interesting area because, I grew up in Boston, but I now live in Rochester, New York, in the surrounding area. And Rochester is sort of like a minor league Detroit. Like Rochester had a huge industrial boom. Xerox and Kodak, these great giants of the late 20th century, and we're now in sort of post-industrial decline with little pockets of hipsters showing up, potentially gentrifying our city. Detroit is like that, but writ large, as one would say, if one is trying to sound like an academic. A very post-industrial city with lots of pockets of hipsters. I think there's a couple pieces of art which, because this is the thing, okay? Just like the idea that Detroit is insane. I mean, not only did they basically bring us cars, but musically, Aretha Franklin, Diana Ross, Smokey Robinson, and then Iggy Pop and MC5, and then the beginnings of techno, and then, I guess the White Stripes, and then Jay Dilla and Eminem. Like, the musical output, even in decline, out of Detroit is so great that it's obscene that we consider it to be a second-tier city in terms of musical production. You know? I mean, okay, yeah, New York and LA have produced more great musicians, but as far as like proportion of the world population, Detroit is like the Jamaica of America. You know what I mean? Okay, this is my improvisation here. I don't think I'm saying anything offensive, but if I do, understand I'm riffing here. Jamaica is this like little tiny island that somehow managed to completely change culture in the entire world, right? And Detroit is like this large but not large city, mid-sized city that's capable of having this outsized impact on American and therefore world culture. But anyways, going back, I often think of the TV show Detroiters. Speaking of Tim Robinson of I Think You Should Leave, him and Sam Richardson had this sitcom that existed for a couple years on Comedy Central, and it's a very good show because I think it shows a lot of the ambiguity that people from Detroit have about the way Detroit is represented, and sort of pride in the way it's represented and ambiguity. There's a whole bit about hipsters moving in and, wearing shirts that say like, made in Detroit and they're actually from Boston, whatever. That happens a lot. Like any of these places that have cool names, hipsters move in are like, Brooklyn represent, Oakland resident, and they're just, hipster carpetbaggers. But then there's also there's a sort of word cloud that is associated with Detroit. Some of these words I've already used, brutal, rugged, tough. And there's this beautiful scene where in Detroiters, they're advertising agents. And their ad is up against a couple other local ads. And they're all these ads for cars and things like that from Detroit that are just like black and white and gritty. And they just use all these tropes. In Detroit, we make things tough because we're tough. And just like 4 commercials in a row, and they're all variations of that. Chrysler had that whole commercial, imported from Detroit a couple years ago that emphasizes that. So Detroit as a place in the American imagination is a very complex place. And it seems as though that complexity really impacts the people from Detroit as well. There's an abandonment of Detroit, which we are fascinated with. There is decline, which we are fascinated with. So I think if you listen to this album, or any of Protomartyr's album, watch Detroiters, maybe watch Barbarian, the horror movie from a couple years from last year for good measure. You have an interesting sort of portrait of how does America deal with post-industrial decline following the 30 glorious years that ended with the oil embargoes of the mid-70s. Okay? Did you like your assignment? Okay? This is your professor. It's the summer. But if you don't understand Detroit, like you don't really understand America. You know what I'm saying? Like the history of Detroit, in a lot of ways, is the history of industrial and post-industrial America. And fortunately, we have all this great music that can help us understand it. So let's get to the album now. 14 minutes in, I have a Teams meeting I need to go on in half an hour, so I'll finish by then. So what am I going to do with this album where I don't like the first 2 tracks? Skip. I'm just going to skip them. I'll go back to them later. But let's pretend, and if I'm, it's up to me, I'm gonna skip. I'm gonna go to the stamp for this album, the example song, my favorite song, Elimination Dances. Click above the donkey, above the donkey, above the banana. Back off, banana breath. I guess that's why it's having its teeth brushed, because it does banana breath. Elimination Dances. It's got this great Western guitar to start off, and then these toms playing this great rhythm. Sort of like that, like it's a little bit off kilter, not quite 4/4. Something like that, like chugging synthesizers, sounds in the back. This is just the way that they are making this album. Drums forward, vocals forward, and then guitars are like washes in the background. They're like layers of just layers, just being put in the background. But then it settles nicely into very pointed guitars. Really on the 1, 2, 3, 4, slightly off melody, a little bit of anger there, like just in the way these things sound. It's almost a riff, it's almost a drone. I have a 9-month-old baby who loves this song. Like I put it on and she starts just dancing in her high chair. Absolutely loves it. So many great layers. And that's what you have to listen to. You just have to listen to these layers and layers and layers and layers. At the end bit, there's this exciting, simple guitar solo that's just, again, it's very lyrical. It's not, it's like making little melodies that you get attached to. And the themes of the song are personal and global. It's about life out of balance. Elimination dance is a kind of dancing where you get tapped on the shoulder and then you're eliminated from a dance contest. And that's like dance contests used to happen a lot. And if you think about the lyrics here, I'm going to read you the lyrics because this is the stamp. In the desert, I was humbled. Apparently they recorded this album in Texas. So there you go. So that's why it's referred to desert. But it's about growth in the desert. Okay, so he was humbled, which implies that growth comes from being humbled, which is true. It's the easiest way to grow is to be humbled. Seeing what 1,000 years of ice did, but I'm not cold-hearted. So I assume this is referring to the Ice Age, that the glaciers made this desert. They carved their swath across the plains and made this space. Little dog still lick my hands. I think he's sort of implying that he himself is not cold-hearted. He himself is not a desert person. He feels a certain vibrancy and a certain life. And even if he seems like he's this cold-hearted guy who is incapable of loving himself and incapable of being loved, that he has this warmth to him because little dogs still lick his hands. And I assume donkeys. That's how Elimination Dances through the life of mine. That's how Elimination Dances, the tap calls the time. So what I like about this is that the word dances is sort of it's a homophone, for dances and dance is. So that's how Elimination Dance is, and that's how Elimination Dances. It's intentionally ambiguous to see if Elimination Dances is like if dance is a verb or just part of this phrase. And the idea the tap calls the time, the tap I think obviously means that if life is an elimination dance, the tap is when you're dead, so that you can see life as being a dance until you're dead. The next verse, I was sucking on a rubber ear for your and my amusement, terms of service that ain't so clear, pale youth is my replacement. This is that middle-aged stuff, okay? It seems as though he's sort of commenting on like online entertainment, sucking on a rubber ear. Maybe that's like ASMR stuff. I don't get ASMR. I've never enjoyed it, even a little bit. Is it supposed to be sexual? It's just kind of creepy and makes me want to barf. But anyways, that's my opinion. If you have a different opinion, tell me in the comments. Why do you love ASMR? But it's terms of service that ain't so clear. This is another thing that he does. I think his lyricism reminds me in a positive way of a sort of better version of the Tom York school of lyricism, where you just take terms that exist and you restate them and then you recontextualize them. And by recontextualizing them, you might be, hopefully, emphasizing the alienation that one might feel in society. Okay? Like terms of service is a great example of that idea. Pale youth is my replacement. This might be just his role as an artist, that he's an artist. And now if you, there are people out there who make a living whispering into a microphone. Okay? There are people who wake up in the morning and they feed their family. They buy dog food with money that they get for moving together cork drink coasters. Give me money. I'm an artist. Actually, that is kind of nice. Hey, maybe I get it. Look at Professor Skye's ASMR channel. But, this is the idea of being replaced by pale youth. So, pale youth, he's getting a little Xer boomer here, because obviously younger people are now paler because they're not going outside as much. But it's great. Built super strongly. This great instrumental break where the bass, hey buddy, he Kool-Aids out of the wall back there and says, "Oh yeah," and starts playing some very pronounced octave play. Great little riffs on the guitar. Leads into this final version of the chorus. Cuts a little bit more loose. These guitars in the back are just kind of curling around and the bass gets more activated and he keeps repeating the word time, time, time. And then there's echoing distortion and leads directly and perfectly over this distortion into the next song, Fun in High School, Skool. This is where the drums are led on the rim. So if you have a drum, there's the head of the drum, pop, and then there's the rim. So that kind of sound is used a lot on this album by the drummer Alex Pearson, I think is his name. And then ominous sounds in the background. The guitars are just like punctuation. The drummer's doing so much work. Muscular drums, yelling, angry singing, but not yelling, growling. I'd say growling. And then the guitar's almost like surf guitar in the background. And a lot of it's about this sort of nostalgia, about the falseness of nostalgia, referring to tough skins, which were these kinds of jeans that were sold by Sears that couldn't be worn out. That was the idea. I'm going to turn into Annie Rooney here, but remember when they used to sell clothes that lasted more than a month? Got to keep the mummy entertained. I don't know what he's talking about here, but it makes me remember my friend Bob, who told a story about getting lost in the South. And someone saying, "Do you want to see a mummy with a glass eye?" Remember when you were young, at least you had fun in high school. My son's graduating from high school. I have a baby and a graduating senior. And they're doing a lot of stuff at the end of the year. I remember graduating being nothing. We didn't have senior assassins. We didn't have senior skip day, or at least I didn't senior skip day. I didn't go to prom. We didn't have senior brunch or senior dinner, any of that stuff. Senior bonfire, none of that stuff. There's a lot more memorizing it now, but there's this sense, at least you had fun in high school. We have to remember that nostalgia is the father of fascism, okay? I didn't come up with that sentence. I don't know if that sentence is entirely accurate. Maybe we could say nostalgia is a father of fascism, okay? The desire for things to be a certain way and they weren't actually that way and trying to restore a world into that. That's what this theme is here, but sort of a personal nostalgia about the sadness of life, remembering at least you had fun in high school. If you're lucky, you did not peak in high school. I'm lucky. I did not peak in high school. I peaked 20 minutes ago when I said no cap. Next song is called Let's Tip the Creator. I mentioned this before. Nice kind of a break in the style of the album, but there's the sonic continuation with the rim hits on the snare. Now the lead guitar is playing far behind. The drums just keep going. Beautiful, sparse guitar melody. The guitar is more up front, which provides that little change. This is what I'm talking about. Like this album has a lot more visible changes from song to song, or it's a lot more noticeable. The differences between song to song are much more subtle here. Great, intricate, and again, brutal. I keep using the word brutal. It might be Detroit bias breakdown. It's sort of a hidden political song because he's making direct reference to Elon Musk, who he calls Oka Rusleg, and his lithium fires. He makes reference to Zuckerberg, calling him Sugar Mountain. These kind of playful words. But on the one hand, singing about Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg is stupid and played out. On the other hand, these people are everywhere. I mean, the amount of space that like Bezos and Zuckerberg and Musk take up in our collective consciousness. I remember what Trump was like in the 80s, okay? Trump was this figure of wealth, but like he was sort of it, you know? Like we weren't thinking, even though we were, laying the groundwork for the dystopia that we live in now of idolizing billionaires. Like there weren't that many like rich and famous people who controlled everything in our lives that we were looking up to. I guess maybe Lee Iacocca, if you're from Detroit, I guess there were sort of famous car guys, but I think it's important. This might actually be why. They might be in a better place to look at it because these kinds of magnates, these kinds of robber barons are very present in Michigan history. Like that's everywhere you go in Michigan is named after some guy who started one of the car companies, right? And so here's where reading the interviews really helps. So the whole idea came from him watching Mark Zuckerberg's introduction to the Metaverse. If you're watching this in the future, Metaverse was a failed concept by Facebook creator Mark Zuckerberg in which we would all hang around with poorly rendered avatars of ourselves. Yeah. And there's a scene here that the singer describes here. Mark Zuckerberg's big introduction video to the Metaverse where he's hanging out with sycophants and they're all talking about how you can look at street art and tip the artists. And I just thought that was a perfect example of how these people do not understand art. They do not understand the importance of it or the need for it or why it's there. Wouldn't it be great if we can reduce art down to something that you tip, like getting a cup of coffee? It's disheartening, but if anything, it gives me things to sing about. And this is true. This is why I'm saying tip the creator, I mean, the positive side is I am an absolute nobody who has no business talking about music. I got my doctorate in French, so what the hell why are you watching me, okay? The democratization of distribution is wonderful. But at the same time, I'm good enough at this. I should be able to quit my job and do this full time, but I can't. I just have to hope that you tip the creator. I have to hope. I don't even have to hope that you send me money. I have to hope that you smash the like bucket. I have to hope that you subscribe. Like that's it, and all these people up the chain, they're just grabbing all the money and then they're telling the consumers to tip the creator. Hey, Mark, pay the creator. Support the writer's strike. All right, next song is called Graft versus Host. Almost like metal style music, like heavy metal, grinding and plodding, but then it gets lush. Again, that's that subtle variation, which is more evident on the last album, but still here. Very cool bits here, like toms and a single hi hit. Interesting guitar usage. I wonder if this is in reference to the TV show Arrested Development, Graft versus Host. There was an unsettling plot line where David Cross's figure had a hair transplant that rejected the host, but I don't think so. It turns out when I read description, it's about his mother's death. Apparently there's 2 songs on this album about his mother's death. Did I cry this morning when reading these lyrics? Yes, I did. Am I over my mother's death? No. If you care about your parents and they're not dead, welcome to your future. It's going to stick with you for the rest of your life. Hooray! I can't get over losing my parents. It's just what happens. But here's some songs about it, She'd want me to try and find happiness in a cloudless sky, so let it take over, knowing if it goes wrong, there's no denying Vanta Black in the starless sky, so let's take it over. Just this beautiful idea of death as being the Vanta Black, something you can't look into. Maybe he was watching Fleischman is in Trouble, great TV show starring Mark Zuckerberg himself, Jesse Eisenberg, playing a doctor who looks just like my brother. It's very funny. But, interesting. And then we get into 3,800 Tigers. Okay. This is the single off the album. I don't know if it's a single, but this is the track. A funky guitar riff. Finally, the guitar's in the front here. You might think it's a throwaway riff. You might think it's kind of like a Home Depot honey whiskey style music, but it actually just gets saved by these beautiful smashing guitars. General, just great production, wonderful layering. It settles really nicely with this echoed guitar. This is a lot closer to the sort of catchiness of their last album, but it's just really fun. It's a great theme. 3,800 tigers in the world, too many of you fools. This idea that that that's how many tigers there are in existence. There's only 3,800, and there's so many people and so many people who are stupid. Again, tying into that sort of Viagra Boys style lamentation about the de-evolution of humanity. But then there's a second bit, which is about baseball. So if I didn't already feel a great connection to this lead singer, being from Boston, I love baseball. Even though I'm a super smarty art guy, I cannot lose my love of baseball. And being the same age, we have similar touch points. So it says 3,800 Tigers swept the series, but none played as good as you, Sweet Lou. So this is perfect because I'm not a Tigers fan. I know most of the famous Tigers in world history. And when he said Sweet Lou, I knew exactly who he was talking about. He's talking about Lou Whitaker, And it's interesting because he's talking about baseball. Okay, great. Talking about baseball. And he's still talking about that other thing. He's still talking about tigers and tigers. He is simultaneously talking about a baseball team and an animal. And I don't think that it matters that we can't always parse which one is he talking about at that specific time. So this is my promise, okay? Sometimes artists watch my videos. And listen, if you know the artists and you watch this video, feel free to send him this click, okay? Send him just to this link. I will give you Lou Whitaker's rookie card. I have it in my collection. I love it. It's a great card. That 78 set. It's a great card. But I'll give it to you. So if the lead singer of Protomartyr would like, if John Casey would very much like to have my copy of Lou Whitaker's rookie card, I will send it to anywhere you want. Okay? To thank you. That's how I'm going to tip the creator. Because, man, Lou Whitaker's not even in the Hall of Fame. What's going on? Come on. Also, when we talk about decline, if he's my age, if you were a Tigers fan in the 80s, oh my God. You had two things going for you. One, they won the 1984 World Series. Great series, okay? And with Jack Morris was on that team, right? Wasn't he just destroying the world then? God, they were so good, right? And then Tom Selleck, before he was the fascist on Blue Bloods, was wearing a Detroit Tigers hat on Magnum PI, making it the coolest baseball hat you could possibly own. Okay, next song is called Polo Acrylics, Kids. Great toms and gentle guitar tracing a melody, almost like rapping here, kind of a stilted delivery. So much great. When I'm talking about the way the guitars and bass are used, please understand I'm not criticizing them. I think it's restraint that they're showing here. And this is a great example of this reverb on the background of the second verse. There's just so much great guitar work happening. It's never up front the way the vocals and the drums are. And in some ways, it's a continuation of the last song where he talked about like tigers chewing but not biting, or people chewing and not biting. And this whole song is about chewing. But this is about something else I can relate to, quitting smoking. Although I am straight edge, I barely drink. I've never done a drug. I did smoke cigarettes for a couple years, a fact which confuses the hell out of my wife. It was a very sort of self-destructive period of time. So Polo Acrylics is the nicotine that's found in gum. So the whole song is about like, I am back, no more smoke, just gum in my jaws, or smoke when I'm alone and need the tar. So he's fighting with quitting smoking, which the third time I quit smoking, the second time I quit smoking was when I was driving back and my mom had stage 4 ovarian cancer. I didn't want to be in a cancer ward smoking, She made it through that. She died of something else. So I kind of get this sort of meditation on life and death that comes there. Just so you know, if you want my advice on how to quit smoking, nicotine patches are great because if you smoke when you have a patch on, you get sick. So it really prevents that. And then get sugar-free gum. So get gum that's tasty. You can choose as much sugar-free gum as you want. And then you have the patch, couple weeks, you should be good. Anyways, that's the misery of quitting smoking. As I tell my kids, addiction is a terminal disease that you give yourself. Okay? I will always be a cigarette addict, even though I haven't smoked in 6 years. I don't know how long it's been. It's been a while. Whatever. It's been 20 years since I smoked regularly. But it's an interesting question that he asks at the end. Can you hate yourself and still deserve love? Lou Whitaker was born in Brooklyn, New York. But he made his home in Martinsville, West Virginia. Did you know that? That's wild. Anyways, let's get back to that line. Can you hate yourself and still deserve love? That is a very powerful question. That is a very relatable question. That is like the essence of self-hatred. The essence of the anger that you understand that even though he's angry at the world and he's angry at Zuckerberg and he's angry at Bezos and all them, he's also very much angry at himself. What a question. And what a great way not to answer it. And what a great context to ask it when you're quitting smoking, because smoking is an act of self-hatred. Okay, it is. It's like, I want to die. Okay, that's what you say. There's no excuse anymore. There's even some pedal steel in the back. There's a lot of pedal steel on this album. I like it. Then we get to the song Fulfillment Center, again in that sort of Tom York-y way of taking words that are part of our lexicon and recontextualizing them. Full battery of noise to start, bass and guitar, wall of voices singing very slightly on this one. This is where we talk about the Midwest, Picaresque. They couldn't find the fulfillment center. I guess we're deep in someone else's dream. Keep driving till we stop. There's a fulfillment center that has just been built by Amazon on my way to work. And the college where I work, which I do not represent, but where I work, is very excited because they are now creating an intern program where our graduates with a 4-year degree are getting the chance to get a job at the fulfillment center. Yippee. God. Anyways, I am not saying anything against that program, okay? My words will tell you that I have no opinion whatsoever about this practice that is taking part at my place of work, okay? So please read the transcript of this, how I feel about this. Maybe yes, maybe no. It could be a good thing, okay? Fulfillment center. That's what they're called. Fulfillment centers. And people who work at them are probably not fulfilled being in someone else's dream, delivering packages one day so that Jeff Bezos can go to the moon. Hell yes, okay? That's the reality of our life. The reality of our life is hell yes. That's the reality. That's where we live. That's the world that is being described to us. Are you fulfilled by hell yes? Hammering on the crash cymbal, great break at the end, just the hum of an amp. Then we get to We Know the Rats. Great heartbeats on the toms, sweet and sweeping sounds, guitars so interesting and passive. Repeat listens just get better and better. This actually has the biggest hook on the album. So collect those tears and wash your face. The house is empty, but the work remains. It's weird because I'm cleaning out my dad's house now, along with my brothers, and that's how it feels. Like, collect those tears, wash your face, the house is empty, but the work remains. It turns out this is about his house being broken into 4 times in a few weeks and why he had to move. This is the sad reality that even if your principles tell you that you need to do what is best for everybody as a personal human being, you cannot willingly put yourself in a bad position. You have to have your personal needs perhaps trump the needs of staying in Detroit, right? Staying in the place you grew up. And the police officers don't care when he calls. Clever pigs never getting stressed. Yeah, we know the rats. He has this whole verse where he talks about like trying to scare them away with a Dimitri Young baseball bat. Apparently Dimitri Young's another baseball player who almost won the World Series with the Tigers. They got beaten by the Giants. God, the Giants won way too many World Series. Who loves the Giants, But Dimitri Young's an interesting person to highlight. Just sort of a strange, he's sort of a Whitaker-esque figure in the Giants' history. Then we get to the song The Author, kind of a shuffle, blown out sounds, nice change of pace. This is again about his mother's death. There's like an urgency in his voice. The drumming, still nuts, but it's kind of behind a bit. And I absolutely cried this morning on the couch over there in the other room reading these lyrics because he is putting into words the way that one feels. Now I'm going to tell you this one born upon a kitchen table when she passed away, sleeping across the shoulder of my brother. Just, that's, that he encapsulated her whole life from birth to death. And then after that, he sort of fills in there. can I make you see the simple beauty in the knowing of her? Especially with mothers who, given their age, are often marginalized by patriarchy. That what makes them interesting and fascinating is not the things that they did, but the way that they were. So what he's describing is the simple beauty of knowing her. If there's good on me, chant it out to her. She is the author. Going back to this theme of like self-hatred, going back to this theme of is he good enough, and is everything that's good about him just coming from his mother? I don't know. I'm not going to cry again, so I'm going to move on to the next song. Rain Garden is the next song with his great slurred charisma. That's sort of the term I started using. More toms and wall of guitars. I swear to God, this drummer is so awesome because it's like, it feels like he forgot that you can make drum beats using a hi-hat and a snare, you know? It's like, bro, he's like, oh, I can do 1 second. But it's great. It creates the textures of Protomartyr. The shape of the album is this kind of music. And this is a beautiful song where, according to the interview, he actually discovered that he was worthy of love in a parking lot next to a Coney Island hot dog store and a Taco Bell. Okay? And this is modern life. When we are Saul on the way to Damascus and we have our great revelations, they are not going to come on a rocky road astride a horse or a donkey or a mule, okay? They are going to happen in a parking lot next to a Taco Bell. The rain garden, that's the parking lot, gave me an answer, though it yielded not, but 2 doves of morning, a half-full Baja Blast, a sunset receding, I am deserving of love. Baja Blast is a kind of Mountain Dew that you can get just at Taco Bell, and this is the grotesqueness and the beauty of life, that you can have these moments, you can have these realizations, almost like a shuffle. I'm realizing at this point that the guitar layers remind me a lot, very positively, of Morrissey's solo work in the early 90s, that kind of sweeping epicness there. And then, oh, love, make way for love, kiss me. It's actually like a love song, you know? And this is what it is, you know? This is it. We're seeing actual growth in the actual effing desert, okay? He's quitting smoking. He's working on himself. He's processing the death of his parents. He is on the way, okay? He is on the way. I don't know this guy. I don't know. I saw a picture of the band. I don't know which guy he is, okay? I'm not like some Protomartyr super fan, okay? Except I swear to God, I'm going to send him the Lou Whitaker rookie card. I don't know this guy, but I know this guy because I remember where I was on my journey, which was made easier and harder by certain things that happened in my life, and he's on his way. To close everything out, I have my meeting in 5 minutes. Make Way. That's a nice song, the opening track, but it's just a little bit too loud, just screaming, Mike, make way. And the gentle guitar and the loud guitar, it's okay, but I just don't quite connect to it. I do like how it's completing the idea of make way for tomorrow, and then previously said, you know, make way for love. For tomorrow, very straightforward, kind of 80s feeling, looking for a room to live in the fair city, kind of more discussions of Detroit. Listening to the album a couple more times, the first 2 tracks are not bad, but they are my least favorite tracks on the album. So in my mind, it sort of goes in that direction. So there you go. I have my meeting. I have to make way for sitting in a Teams room, talking about assessment of student learning outcomes or some of the other banal stuff that is the truth of being a professor. But thank you for supporting me. Thank you for tipping the creator with your smashed like buckets. And thank you to Protomartyr for being like a great American post-punk band. They can't all be British, everybody, or Canadian. Okay, Americans, put down your DJ tables and your computers. Make some rock and roll. Don't let Jack White have the last word. Okay, here's the camera.